RPG rules idea, how to handle critical information in your game.
Yeah. So basically, if you're having vital information that the players need to know, and if you're playing like a D&D where you have a check DC, or if you're playing a GURPS where they need this many successes, make it so stupidly simple that when they roll, they'll always get that information. So you're not stuck in this thing of all of them needed a 15 and
no one did it.
The rogue who has a plus 11 rolled a 1 and everybody else failed.
Right. So, and we'll just give a real life example. I'm going to pick on my brother-in-law because actually when he and I were talking about this and he brought it up. But so we were playing a GURPS campaign and we got stuck. And so he asked us all to roll an intelligence roll. Well, the problem was like...
highest one had a 14.
I had a 10 in my intelligence.
I had a 12.
And then the other guy had a 14.
14. And
so...
14 botched his roll.
We had to roll it every time. We just had to keep rolling intelligences. And the answer was we weren't getting any successes ever. And so now what happened is the critical information we needed was basically locked away, and there was no way to get it.
Yep.
And so what happens, and I think this happens a lot, and it'll happen under stress too, where if you're just trying to do something on the fly, and you're like, oh, well, I can give them information on the fly, and you try to get them to do a roll for it, and they don't get it, what are you going to do? And so this comes from Kenneth Haidt and his podcast. Ken and Robin talk about stuff from one of the early episodes. One of the things that he created Night's Black Agents around was the concept of if you had a point in a skill, you would automatically succeed to know basic information about said skill. So, and then he only has three dots in a skill. So if you have one dot in a skill, you're going to know everything you can possibly know about that as an expert. Like you're an expert, you have 10,000 hours in whatever that skill is, right? 2 dots means that you're like one of the top 30 people in the world with that. You've written books, you can teach seminars, you can go...
And then 3 dots is
you're
one of the 10 people in the world who are the best at this.
Exactly. So if it's like computers, it's like you wrote Linux operating system from the ground up.
Or you're a co-founder of Microsoft because you wrote...
Right, but you're the tech co-founder, right? Yeah. Not just I'm the business guy. It's like, no, your stuff is so good, like you didn't, it's like, oh, we're going to hack. It's like, that's fine. I kind of accidentally invented hacking back in the 50s. It's that kind of a level of assertion. So it's really hard to get 3 dots in anything. So how would you translate that into like a GURPS or into a D&D or even into like a Vampire the Masquerade, World of Darkness?
There's 2 ways you can go.
Yeah.
You could make the DC on that in D&D like a 5.
So a check.
So it's really impossible. And if they even
really impossible to fail, you mean? Yeah.
And even if they do, you just drop the number to whoever's the highest. So you know just enough information, but you have things of like, oh, if they got a 10 or if they got a 20, I'll give them more information.
Yeah.
But my bare minimum is literally a DC 1. They can't fail.
Right, exactly. And because the thing is, if you're doing like a campaign that requires some sort of clue to hit the next hook, which, no offense, even if you're not playing like a mystery game, there's a lot of times where it's like, okay, you're rummaging through somebody's desk, right? You're rummaging through the wizard's tower. Cool, do me a search check. 8's the highest. Okay, we don't find anything.
Yep.
Well, at which point you're like, crap, they need to find something because they need to find this information to find this gate. This gate's going to lead into another dimension, and the other dimension is actually where the other wizard is and where all the hostages are held, and this is exactly where the game is. So they got an 8. I mean, my God, I thought they would have done better than that.
Yep.
But the guy who had a base 7 in it rolled a 1, so he got an 8, and
So
we're done.
Yep. So at that point, grab whoever had the highest base, and he finds it.
Well, what I would do, I wouldn't even do that necessarily. At that point, like what I would suggest you doing, if there's a critical clue, you figure out what's the basest of base information you would give, even if they got like almost nothing. And it could just simply be this: as you're looking through the guy's files, you see a lot of hand-drawn pictures of what you recognize to be extra dimensional or extra planar gates.
Yep.
Oh, because again, if you have a wizard in your party at all, they're familiar enough with the spells. They may not be able to cast it, but they've seen it.
As long as they have a spellcaster in the party, all of them know spells. They might not necessarily be able to cast it, but a divine caster knows what arcane spells look like.
Right. It's not like I can't cast Fireball, but I do know that there's a spell called Fireball, and I do know that it actually, works in this way. Like I may not know all of the components I have to do. I don't know the hand motions I have to make. I don't know the words to say because I'm not able to cast it. But I've seen wizards cast Fireball. I've heard of wizards casting Fireball. And the same would be, I've heard of wizards casting a gate spell or a dimensional travel spell.
I've seen the wizard jot down spells in his spell book, so I know what the format of a spell is in the arcane sense.
Yeah. And I see pictures of this guy obsessed with gates. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm going to start looking for something, as we're starting to work through the wizard's keep. I'm going to look for like this permanent gate thing that I saw on this piece of paper downstairs. Yep. And that's fine. I can give that to you for like any DC, as long as you're like, oh, as a spellcaster, you see XYZ. And that is enough for then, let's say 3-4 floors up, they come across something and it's basically, they're like, oh, look, it's this, look, those runes. The guy's like, I've seen those runes before. And then you can make them do a basic like intelligence check or something like that and make the DC really low. So where it's just like, you think you've seen it written down the last day. That should hopefully enough of a thing. And then if they get something really high, it's like, oh yeah, you recognize those from that wizard's book you saw back, in that desk 3 floors ago where he was talking about all the gates and stuff. And they go, oh, this is a gate. Okay. And then they can start making rolls to figure out how it works or where it goes or those sorts of things. But at least you've led them to the gate and you've gotten them to the point where it's like, we know what it's for.
Yep.
And I hate to say this, but at least, you don't have to go as far as like big red button, like push me, to open the gate. But the concept here is you don't want your players just sitting there going, okay, we'll roll an intelligence roll. Okay. 8. Nope. You don't know anything. What do you want to do? What do you mean, what do I want to do? There's nothing to do. I have nothing to do.
Yeah.
You just don't want to get to that point.
Setting how many successes if you're in a GURPS scenario or how many, like, your DC's high causes a high potential of everybody's rolls just went crappy at that one moment and they're stuck because they have nowhere to go and you're feeling frustrated because now you're like, how can I throw them the bone now because I can't have them recheck again because why would they check again?
Yeah, well, and again, it's the same thing. So like, if you can't bench press 200 pounds and I put a 200-pound bench weight and I just keep telling you, well, just keep trying, that's not how that works. And intelligence is the same way. It's like, look, here's a book, and it's in a foreign language. Do you recognize it? No. Roll again. No. Roll again.
At the very least.
Like, well, if I either know it or I don't.
At the very least, for a good chunk of D&D, depending on how you're running it, you always do have a bone you can throw them.
Yes.
By having your wizards or anybody who can cast Detect Magic roll another intelligence to have them think about casting Detect Magic.
Well, you could
then you could give them another bone.
Or you could just, as a DM in that case, just tell them like, are there any spells you'd like to cast to see if maybe you could get some insight into this? Great, now give me another roll. And by that point, realize, wait a minute, I need to drop this.
Yes.
And maybe if they know it's magical, I can drop the DC down to like a 3 because they're going to put together that it's magic and they know magic. They're going to put together the other stuff they know and then they can combine the two.
Yep.
Point is, the real easy thing here is if you need your players to get something to move the story forward, either A, give it to them, but that becomes horrible because then it feels railroady.
Yes.
There's always a piece of paper underneath the door. There's always somebody coming to your rescue. Or you let them find it, and no matter how crappy the roll is, they found all the papers. Cool. Now peruse the papers. Like, had you not failed the first roll, I would have just given it to you, but you failed the first roll in a way, so you found the papers.
You're still giving them player agency because they're not just getting it handed to them.
Right.
But at the same time, you're removing the potential RNG of screwing you in that regard.
And I'm also saying, like, okay, so like if the DC is like, say you need to find 4 people. And if you rolled like a 20, which is what I was hoping you do, you would find a piece of paper with all 4 of the people's names on it. Well, you rolled like a 3 or a 5 or a 7. And I'm like, crap. So I'm going to give you one person's name, which is going to now lead you to that person, which if you do well in that encounter, you'll get the other 3 people's names, and now you're back to player agency again.
No matter how bad they roll, they always have a lead to get them there.
You just don't want them...
Not nearly as good as what if they rolled better, but they are not stuck.
Right, because the point of the thing is to have fun, and if all your players are doing is just rolling the same thing and just their dice are cursed that night, it's not fun for anybody.
You basically want to make it if in a GURPS thing. If everybody critically botches,
They still get it.
they still can find a way through.
Yep, exactly. And with that, we'll see you next time.